Born and raised in Miami. So I keep hearing that's a rarity, but I also keep meeting people like me, so keeping it alive for all of us. I started this physical space, space, in 2011 to 2012. And it was essentially a response to meeting and, as David said, building relationships with these artists and realizing that there was a void here in Miami for affordable studio spaces. Especially at the time, there were a few that existed where artists could either get residencies or there was like the Bakehouse and Art Center at the time, which is Ulite now, were the main ones at the time that were, not artists just renting a warehouse for themselves. And so this was a response to that, and I'll take it a few steps back to get to kind of how this all came together more in detail. I will introduce our panelists a little bit. I'm gonna take you through my journey and then bring you to how the panelists came to be here. So like David said, we're talking about trust. And that's something that I think today a lot of us struggle with, trusting other people, trusting ourselves maybe. I think the pandemic played a role in kind of, trusting others, trusting ourselves. So I think the three areas of trust that I wanted to focus on and I think that are relevant, there's trust in yourself, like I mentioned, there's trusting other people, and there's trust in, and here it's, it's kind of, it's hard to narrow it to one definition because I think everyone has their own version of this, but trust in something outside of those first two. So whether it's God, whether it's a higher power, whether it's fate, whether it's chaos, whether it's, whatever it is, it's something external to, everything that's right here in front of our eyes. So I'm gonna start with my personal story, which, as I mentioned, I'm a bit of a multitasker. So, like I said, I was born here in Miami. Growing up, in part because it was a small school, but I played like the lead role or main roles in like the musicals, and I took piano lessons. On one side, my family's French, so it's kind of mandatory. I would play in like recitals, and I would do all these things that were creatively fulfilling. And there was always some degree of like a need for control there. So I don't know how many of you can relate, but I feel like a lot of us as kids, we have that impulse or that reflex of like when our parents like try to take pictures of us or, home movies, depending on the generation. At least I had this aversion. I was like, no, like I would always like run away. I wouldn't want to be on camera, but for some reason, I didn't have that same aversion being on a stage in front of 100 or a couple hundred people. And in hindsight, I realized that it was a little bit of that control factor, right? There was a script, there was directions, there was lines. It wasn't me, right? It was a version of me it was a version of someone else that I was playing. And even as a kid, I think there's that kind of, there's that security, there's that trust in, it's not me, it's someone else. So as I got older, as happens to all of us, I kind of, there was kind of two things. One, I changed schools, and then also, so when I was 13, my dad used to play in like amateur soccer tournaments. He would have his like group of friends that he would play with all the time. And so he was playing in this annual tournament, and it was a school night, and I was begging. I was like, can I go, Mom, please, whatever. And my dad was he's always like the easygoing one. He was like, whatever. And my mom, pediatrician, Jackson Moore, for over 30 years, was much more like, school night, you're gonna be tired tomorrow. So as it happens, my dad actually passed away at that soccer game, had a heart attack on the field. And that, that does a lot, to a kid. And it's one of those things where I was really mad at my mom that night for like, not letting me go have the fun night that I wanted to have. But coming back to trust, right, and trust in things outside of ourselves. That loss had a big impact on me, and I only realized more in the last probably handful of years, or that good, mental health awareness stuff, how much of an impact it really did have on me. But obviously, I can imagine how much more of an impact I would have had my mom been the more easygoing parent. Yeah, go ahead, and I had actually been there. So trust in the universe, trust in the plan, So I'll say that the kind of moving forward, the impact that had on me, I grew up, I was the oldest boy with 2 younger sisters and, a now widowed mom. I had grown adults being like, well, you're the man of the house now, take care of your mom, take care of your sisters. And that influenced, the next 10, 15 years of my life where I started working for my grandpa, I was the responsible kid, I was, the business guy, I was good at sales, and that really dictated kind of the path that my life took. And so the kid who was, into like performing and into kind of being in the center of attention, took a back seat, and it was, okay, this is my identity now. At 15, I still remember my grandpa would drive me home from school because I had my learner's permit, and I still remember him asking me like, oh, I'm thinking about selling the company, do you see wanting to do this? And at 15, I was like, yeah, this is what I'm gonna do. And, trusted in my family, in, the circle of people around me that were kind of, I don't think intentionally pressuring me or kind of trying to push me down this path, but, they want what's good for me and want me to succeed. And I trusted them, to a certain extent to say, regardless of what passions or kind of what things that I had inside of me that I wanted to pursue, those were things that, became filler. It was like things that when there's time or in certain ways, I could explore. And, that was the next 10 years. It was very, very nose to the grindstone, working for my grandpa, the warehouse deliveries, like kind of working my way up. And I'm eternally grateful that I had that opportunity and that experience because it gave me a lot of knowledge, experience in the business world that I wouldn't have had otherwise. But in 2009, I graduated from the University of Miami. I moved to Edgewater because what native Miamian doesn't like, likes commuting. So I moved to Edgewater because I didn't want to be in downtown. That was like too, New Yorky even at the time. And living in Wynwood wasn't necessarily, it's not that it wasn't an option, but I like that nice balance. And our warehouse was in Wynwood for the perfume business. So I ended up in Edgewater 15 years ago. And that's where I really kind of started getting back in touch with my creative side, but kind of with this wall up, right, of I'm still the business guy. I'm the guy who knows how to kind of navigate business situations. And as I started going out to places like the Vagabond, not Vagabond Motel, and the stage and Transit Lounge and meeting musicians, artists, comedians, it really was the way that I found to comfortably navigate associating with the creative world without necessarily putting myself out there in a creative way. And that's how Young Miami started. It was a Facebook page that in 2009, 2010, I was in the heart of this kind of like storm that was brewing in Wynwood and all this community and this culture that was growing. And I started a Facebook page to share with, my less cool, and less in the know friends, like, hey, this whole area exists that you don't know about, but there's things happening. There's Art Walk every Thursday, and there are all these opportunities to see and do cool things. And it was really very organic, and like David mentioned, it was this idea of building trust with the people that I was getting to know, and eventually with people I was meeting, venue owners, business owners, that it was really something that, again, came from my experience in the perfume business, because I was so used to dealing with kind of high-level people within companies, and we dealt with, TJ Maxx and Marshalls and like chains, and then mom and pop shops, and all these different levels of business where I would be dealing with the owners, the president, the decision makers, and as a teenager to young 20s person, that eventually garnered respect in the role that I was in, because I had been doing it long enough. It gave me that perspective and that position to be able to go into these situations prepared, and I think in a way that the people I was dealing with weren't used to. And what I mean by that is and all of you have, if you've been in Miami for more than a year, I'm sure you're familiar with what I'm about to say, but I would have potential clients that would say, oh, like, you're so responsive, or oh, you show up on time. It's not like, it's like the bare minimum. But in Miami, that's we all know that's not, the bar is set much lower. So there was building that trust with the people that I was establishing more like work or client relationships with, but then also with the artists that I was getting to meet. One of them will be up here with me as a panelist, and another couple in the crowd. I think the reason that I was able to build the relationships that I did with them was because there was this element of respect and appreciation for what they were doing, because it was something that I, again, had that kind of like core part of myself that that had the passion for it. So I understood the bravery and the trust, in themselves, in their talent, that it took to really pursue that professionally. And I feel like in a town like Miami, where a lot of times it's all about, the surface and the, like just slapping, a shiny coat of paint on something, I think artists appreciate being appreciated and being seen and being valued. And, I've been fortunate enough to do some maybe higher profile projects. I was running my business on the side of the family business for the first 8 or 9 years that I was doing it. So there was only so much that I could do, but I'm still very grateful that I built a network of over 200 creatives spanning musicians, artists, comedians, some of which are nationally touring at this point and doing amazing, huge things. And it's because I think it's about that trust that I built with them, where they're, I've never, like, that's the thing that I've heard the most from the people that I work with from the creative side, is talking about the trust that they have in me and the fact that they at least know that I'll have their best interest at heart and do everything that I can to protect them. I'm gonna try and have problems like trailing off, so I think that's enough about me. So I'm gonna jump to the panelists, who I'll do a brief introduction of each, but I want to just touch on, and I'm going to go in order of kind of like how I met them and how they kind of feed into the story I just told. But these are all people that I've met the same way that I've met David, that I've met, some of you here today for the first time. And I think it's been about approaching them with sincerity and with, transparency to a certain point. So I'm going to first bring up Ivan Roque. Goes different ways. So yeah, if you want to come on up, Ivan is a muralist, award-winning muralist, who I first met. So I first met, actually, he was assistant, or the assistant for an artist who I knew, Gigi, at the time. This was in 2011. So. Yeah. And Ivan, my first introduction to him was he dropped a letter in our mail slot over here, and it's one of the things that I wish, I'm a bit of a hoarder, that I wish that it has to be somewhere, but I wish I still had that letter because he's come so far since that time that it's like, I would like frame it. But it was basically a letter talking about how he knew about me through Gigi, who he's working for, and how he would really love to have his first studio here. And it didn't happen right away, but within, I think, like a year of him dropping that letter off, he had his first studio here at YoSpace, and we went on to work on many projects together, and it's come a long way. I'll let you do a little talk, a little, bring everyone else up first. So Caro, we met a couple years ago. But we actually also met here at YoSpace, where she was being interviewed for a comedy documentary that one of the comedians I know is producing, and I've followed her since then, and I love the work that she does to spotlight and so tour guide and cultural advocate, cultural community advocate. I'm not up on all the terms, but she does a great job of spotlighting things around Miami, both for her tours and through social media, that are a little bit more off the beaten path and that involve people who are really doing amazing things. And then Michael Stock, who I'm sure everybody is familiar with, I actually met, and I would not take affront or be surprised if you don't remember this, but we met, it was 3 or 4 years ago at Make Music Miami Day, where I was helping a friend out in production, and finally got off my shift to listen to the last performance of the night of a jazz band that I really like. And I happened to sit down next to Mr. Michael Stock, not knowing who he was and not knowing anything about him. And we struck up a conversation for maybe 10 or 15 minutes as we took in the jazz show. And then the next time I saw him was, I think it was last year, as he got up onto the stage at the Miami Beach Band Shell to MC and host the acoustic, was it the folk festival, acoustic and folk festival? Something like that. Yeah. And I was like, I know that guy. And of course, obviously, I've learned about his story and prestigious past with NPR and WLRN since then. So these are all people who, in another life could have been passing acquaintances that I had an interaction with, and that was it. But again, a bigger plan, right? And I think one of the important takeaways that I have for you guys in this and talking about trust is, it really is important to try to, without being hypersensitive and aware and always trying to kind of catch signs and things like that. I think it's really important to recognize that there's something going on outside of us, and that we all kind of have the ability to tune into kind of the flow of that and find ways to be where we're supposed to be, do what we're supposed to do, be with who we're supposed to be with. And so I'm gonna refer to my notes here. I'm trying to avoid that, but I want to bring in each of our panelists and maybe start with Michael and talk about. The first trust that we can talk about or that we can bring in is your trust in me in being here today, because we had one meeting at your office, and I told you at the time when I reached out, I said, Michael, I don't really have anything specific in mind. I just really respect what you've done, and I've been pursuing journalism more in the last couple of years, and I would really appreciate meeting you, and you took that meeting.
I'm always open to people who want to meet me. I think that was a great compliment, so I appreciate that. But when you asked me to do this, I'm saying, what is trust? The first thing that came to my mind with trust is the motto for the United States, which is in God we trust. It wasn't always the motto, but I think since the 40s or 50s, when the big communist scare here in this country, we adopted that. And I always thought that was a misnomer, because trust is something you earn. It's not something that you have faith in. I think in God we have faith, and we have to earn our trust. And in fact, it's like hope. It's like hope and trust. You live a rotten life if you don't have hope or trust in fellow man or in the plan. But faith is more within yourself, and trust is something that has to be earned. So with that said, I'll talk about two things, basically. One is, my life in folk music, and why I like folk music. And I remember the first time I heard Bob Dylan and his protest music. That really struck me. That kind of directed my life, really, because I got into Dylan, I got into Woody Guthrie, I got into all that kind of music. And it led me to a radio job, doing a folk show, volunteering at a station in Tampa. And the thing that attracted me to folk music was the simplicity of it, was the simpleness of it, and also the honesty of it. And when you think about it, folk music is what music was to everybody. I guess in long centuries and centuries ago, there could be classical music, which was for the elite, and folk music, which was for the common folk. And then that all these definitions change over time. And when I got into folk music, it was acoustic, it was simple music, and then you can look at the history of music in general and see how it's all changed. Before there were microphones, in order to be a successful singer, you had to emote, kind of like so people could hear you. Since the invention of the microphone, you could whisper and be a star, like a la Bing Crosby. He just kind of crooned into the microphone, and that became acceptable. Things changed in, let's say, in the 60s and 70s. If you don't know who Tom Dowd is, just look up him on the internet. He's an engineer. Fascinating story about a guy who worked on the Manhattan Project, a genius. But after the Manhattan Project was over, which was a secret organization to build the atomic bomb, he tried to get into college, and he couldn't get into college because it was such a secret organization. He couldn't list the Manhattan Project as one of his requirements. So he went into music. He changed the music industry. He created multi-track recording so that you could record something and go back and change it, which influenced every studio in the country, every studio around the world. And so much so that if you see this documentary on Tom Dowd, when musicians went into the studio, they said, who is this guy here? What is he doing? And then at the end of the session, they considered him one of the band because it transformed their music. And then there was other changes that changed the music industry in the 1990s. You know, drum machines. You know about tuners, auto-tuners. I think a big change was in 1996 when Cher came out with their song Believe. It wasn't even her singing, it was like a keyboard with her voice in it. And now we're at a time where we're listening to AI. You could record songs and not even be a musician. You could just put your voice, substitute your voice in there. Getting back to folk music, it gets back to the purity of it. And that's what I think essentially I love about folk music. The definition of that has changed over the years. Woody Guthrie, considered the father of folk music, he never wrote an original tune. He just changed the words to these songs, and it became the father of folk music. Folk music in the 60s was a song that if you wrote your own song, that wasn't considered a folk song. You had to be a song that was traditional. You didn't know who the author was. So that's changed with Bob Dylan. Dylan changed a lot of that. And then the state of folk music today is singer-songwriters. I try to keep it acoustic on my radio show, which is incidentally every Sunday, 3 to 5 on 91.3 FM. And I do a lot of interviews, as long as they come in and do the music live, because to me that's what's pure about the music. You could, with the drum machines and with computers, you could be a musician, you could be an artist, and not have any creative bone in your body. And we're going to see where that future goes, because I am sure eventually that'll be accepted as normal. It's just a matter of time. And the last thing I want to talk about is very important, and it's WLN's news department. And how do you trust? If there's anything you have to trust, it's the news. How are you going to trust the news department? And I've watched from the inside, I'm not in the news department, but I've watched from the inside out of what the news department has gone through and how it has developed. And I like to keep this on my desk. That's okay. It's Rowan Gertie's award for one of the reports he did. I keep this on my desk because this gentleman lost his job at LRN because he did a story on the Dade County Public Schools. I don't remember the specific it was something that they did wrong. The schools, I guess, didn't discipline the teacher correctly. And we did a report on that. And it's a very difficult thing when you're one of the largest school districts in the country, how to be honest, how to be trustworthy. So you always come across mistakes, and you always catch them. We caught them in a mistake, and it cost this gentleman his job. Since then, WLRN has been working very hard to separate ourselves from the school board. The school board is an elected political position, so it's hard not to be trustworthy when you're serving a political organization. But LRN has worked very hard, and I say very successfully, in making the news department independent from the school board. And I keep this on my desk to remind myself how important it is to have an independent news department without any overseer, without paying to any commercial organization. And I gotta say, working at LRN, it's very exciting because there's a bunch of smart people, a bunch of dedicated, trustworthy people. And I'm very happy at this moment to say that, you know, we've solved these problems, and although we all go through growing pains, I'm very thrilled to say that our news department is not only one of the biggest in South Florida now, but it's also the most trustworthy. It's not one of the most trustworthy, but you should always keep your mind open to everything that's out there. Don't become cynical or isolated, and just keep your mind open. But LRN is a great source for news, and that's all I have to say. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I think also to trust that, one thing that I want to just touch on, because I think it's a good transition to Cato, is I feel like having been doing this as long as you're doing it, there's also a trust between the audience and you, and the trust that they have in you, in whether it's your integrity, whether it's your taste. And I think, you know, it's been not misplaced.
One of the things that got me into folk music is that when I was in high school at Miami Beach High, I listened to the radio, and there was top 40, maybe top 100, and I said to myself, there must be more music out there than just whatever they're feeding us. And I realized there's a whole world of music out there, and there's a whole world of folk music. In fact, I brought this as another prop, is that there's charts out there. And I didn't realize it, but I'm kind of an influencer because I look at every month, there's a folk chart that comes out, and I don't pay attention to these things, but I look at it, and all the songs that I play on my radio show are here. Most of the names you don't know: Laurie Lewis, Bevy Gambetta, Benny Blue, wonderful, creative talents that don't get the exposure they should get. And this is just a scratch of the surface. There's jazz artists, and there's there's now a songwriting. I was once a songwriting judge. There's now a category for AI-generated songs, and to me that was crazy. But again, you know, times change, and that's going to become the norm eventually.
Yeah, we're gonna, time will tell. And so, Kat, I just wanted to talk about, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit, but the thought that came to mind for me, why I thought of you and the idea of trust, is in your position or your role as a tour guide. That's a huge amount of trust that people who have maybe either never been here, I know you have locals also tour, so either people who are coming here for the first time or who have lived here but want to get a perspective that they haven't had on the city before, they put an enormous amount of trust in you to guide them, pun intended, to be able to open their eyes and their mind to that new perspective. So how do you see your role in accepting that trust?
Okay, a great question. Thank you very much. So, hi everyone. I'm Carolina Flores. I've been a tour guide since I was 19, so I've been doing it for 9 years now. I'm 28. And I've been a content creator for the last 4 years, like he's mentioned. I make content based on history, so every Monday, or at least I try every Monday, to release an episode of Miami Mondays, and I focus on a different historical landmark or a different story in Miami, just to kind of bring awareness to the amazing background that we have here, that like things that we have we really shouldn't take for granted because we got them one way or another, and a lot of times it wasn't an easy path for whoever paved the way. And I also realized how much history made me appreciate Miami a lot more. So I wasn't born here, I was born in Colombia, but I came here when I was 3 years old. So I was basically born in Miami. I grew up here in West Kendall, and I, like many other people from their hometowns, just didn't really appreciate Miami very much. Who here is from Miami? Or been here longer than 5-10 years? Okay, nice, love it, mostly local. So you probably say all the time, like, Miami sucks, you know? A lot of times we just don't appreciate our hometown as much as we should, but what I learned when I learned all this history is that it made me appreciate it a lot more and see our city in a much more beautiful light. So now I do both. I still work as a tour guide and I work as a content creator as well. But yeah, when it comes to trust and being a tour guide, I never really thought about that actually. So it's really interesting the way that you frame that. And I think that I take that very seriously, which I think is also where my success has come from in that industry, because no other tour guide takes this as seriously as I do. Like, most of the tour guides in Miami are spewing lies, they're just doing this like to make some money. It's not good. And I noticed that when I first went into the industry, I'm like, wow, nobody here takes this job seriously. They don't even like it. They literally don't even like it. That's strange, but I liked it. And yeah, like, people are coming here from all over the world and they're trusting me to guide them, or the company that hired me is trusting me to give their guests the best experience ever and to come out, you know, happy on the other side. And so I took that very seriously, and I think that it's important to do that in any sort of role, but yeah, when it comes to showing people around, I want to make sure that they have a good experience, that they leave with an expanded worldview, a new perspective of Miami than what they see on the media, and really help them form their own viewpoint of our city. So, yeah.
And I think one, maybe just to kind of wrap that up into a bow, like a question I have about how you approach these tours and the experience that you have sharing our city with other people. How do you have any framework for how you decide where you're going to bring them, you know, what you're going to share with them?
Oh yeah, great question as well. So the framework really is just talking to the client. Sometimes the client tells me beforehand what they want to do. Sometimes we'll talk just on the day of. I've gotten really good at reading the room. I get a lot of tour groups that, especially in the summer, actually, for example, I'll give you guys an example. In the summer is our slow season. So a lot of people think this is when everything picks up. That's not the case at all. Summer is super, super slow when it comes to tourism. If you're coming here in the summer, what's wrong with you? Yeah, it's not normal. So the only tours that I really do in the summer are for these teen travel groups who are going to like Ecuador or Peru or like some South American country, and they have a layover here in Miami. So we pick them up at the airport, we do a tour around Miami, then I take them back to the airport and they continue their journey. And so I've gotten really good at reading the room, because for this type of group in particular, this isn't necessarily their final destination. This isn't like the big, you know, kahuna of their travels. And they're tired sometimes. Sometimes they've taken a red-eye flight and then they're getting on my bus and they're just like so exhausted. They haven't eaten in 8 hours. And so I just kind of have to go with the flow of however that group is feeling. I have to go with the flow of however my tourists are feeling. I like to talk to them and try to like understand what their interests are. Do you guys like architecture? Do you like the party scene? Do you like food? Do you like art in general? Like, what is it that you like, so that I could gear that tour more towards what you're interested in and show you that Miami has a little bit of everything to offer everyone. So it's really just a matter of talking with my people and just getting a good feel for their interests and who they are.
Listening.
Yeah.
Another lost art in Miami. So I want to take it over to Ivan, and it's something actually jumping off of talked about kind of your peers or the other guides around the city and how they don't approach it with the same seriousness or passion that you do, and that's something that I touched on earlier. Also, it's something that has made me stand out, and something I want to talk to Ivan about as a muralist, as an artist, who, again, you know, I've seen from before you could drink legally to you know being married and taking on projects, you know, with municipalities in other states. And I think something that I hear talked about often when it comes to the artist community in Miami, but also at large, is this idea of trust among the community and collaboration. And that's something that I'm curious to get your perspective in terms of how you navigate. I know you have your studio mate here, who also used to be a studio mate here at Yo Space Array. So talk about how you navigate trusting other artists. I know you've done exceptional things in terms of you started a scholarship, right?
Yes.
And I know you've
Yes.
mentored younger artists coming up. So how you navigate trusting other artists and sharing what you've learned, while also, you know, I know there's always some degree of there's only so much pie, you know, to go around, and if I help someone else, they're gonna get my slice of the pie. So how do you navigate that kind of the two sides of that?
Oh, hello everybody. I guess a quick little introduction, and then we'll go into a little bit of trust and whatnot, right? So my name is Ivan Roque. I'm a muralist based out here, Miami, Florida, Cuban American. You know, your typical Miami Chico. You know, born and raised here, but I'm from the Carroll City, Hialeah area. Where is not from here? Carroll City is what you know nowadays as Miami Gardens. So from that region. Yeah. So like when it comes to trust and the arts and community, I think first and foremost, I think a saying that a lot of people have probably heard here, people that know, they say that Miami and South Florida is a shady place for sunny people. It's a sunny place for shady people. And the first thing I think is, we got to get that mentality out of here, because that only holds us back. And traveling across the United States, you start realizing that not too many people are like that. Not too many places, you go to places, you're walking, here people you walk and everybody's just like stern face at, but then you go places like, oh yeah, good morning, you're like, oh. But you do that here and somebody's like, what do you want? You know what I'm saying? Well, why are you saying that to me? But so things like that, you start learning to start opening up to people. And then I remember when I started going to college and all that for art, I remember, there was artists there that he's like, oh, you have to go out to art shows, you have to meet other artists, you have to meet people. And then little by little, I started meeting people that were like myself, Ray, you got Yuval, John, and Manny, Lex over here, and everybody else that we've met over the years. You just start building this trust amongst the artists, and then you start seeing that not only you as yourself, but you see that Miami culture is not just you; it's everybody involved. So I think you have to let go of the notion and your ego put aside and realize, like, we're all in this together, and our job is to create the now and give it out to the world, and then expose that to the generations that come after us. Because at the end of the day, one day I'm going to be all old and decrepit, and nobody's going to give a damn about my work. But they're going to care about little dude coming up. What I'm saying? He's going to be what's next and all that. And hopefully I play some sort of influence in that. And that's that's kind of one of the reasons why I find it big in trusting and trusting also. The people that you work with, me and Yuval have gone way back, and mind you, like I've gone through some pretty dark stuff that, like, I won't mention here today. Maybe one day on my autobiography, maybe I don't know. But things that really I should not have any trust in anybody, especially growing up in the part of the city that I grew up in, But like I learned to let all that go, and I've just learned, like you gotta basically know how to deal with people and trust even the snakes. You just sometimes have to know how to handle the snakes. And so in life, You just gotta let, just like, you know, you'll see how much further you go when it comes to trust. And then, you know, and also not to mention, being a muralist, you kind of have to have a lot of trust, a lot of things, right? So like, for example, when I travel to other states, to other communities, you know, people have nothing to do where I'm from. You know, they put a lot of trust in me into creating something that can resonate with them, right? So for example, I remember I did a project out in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, which is a tiny little town in Tennessee. Like, we've ever been there, literally, like, it's probably from here down to the corner store over there, and that's the town, you know, surrounded by mountains. And then I remember, like, you know, we had a virtual town hall, right? And people go to the, you know, I asked them, okay, what are you guys about? Tell me. And so they come up to me and they're like, you know, we're a small town, Friday night footballs, you know, bass fishing, fireworks, mountains. And then, of course, you gotta go do your own research, figure out, okay, because, you know, most of the time I create animals and plants and I kind of try to create a narrative through that, right? So I go and I basically figure out what's native to them and I create a story and I do something. And then it's amazing because as you're creating these pieces, you know, people that you have nothing really in common with, you at that moment you have everything in common with them because now you learn more about them and they're so excited about their community. You know, I remember I did a talk there, and you know, I like to go and I like to really, you know, be a part of the community and do things that they do. I remember one time I went to Avon, New York, which is a little village out of New York, and you know, they're very known for horses. So I was painting these big horses and flowers and all that, and I go and I was eating at one of their burger spots, and everybody kept saying, "You gotta go to this burger spot, you got it." And they had so much pride in it, and it was a cool spot, right? And then I remember at one of the talks I had, I basically compared the town that, you know, it feels as great as having a Tom Walls burger, and everybody just like, what? You start losing your mind, right? And that's the thing, you know, you find those little things to connect with people, you know, and I think that's the most important thing as an artist, and the trust that they have in you is to come over here and not just bring. I'm not gonna go to out of the middle of nowhere in the Midwest and paint flamingos and like tropical plants because that has nothing to do with them, you know. To them, I'm like, oh, that's cool, but like, you know, what does that say about me? You're just coming over here and not caring about what I have to say. And that's something that, you know, I feel like something which is a whole other conversation itself. You know, people that are new to the city and all that. I really believe that you guys should definitely go and learn from the culture that's already here and all that. You know, before coming and bringing what you have. You know, learn about this and how can you incorporate that and keep adding to the beautiful melting pot that is Miami. So,
thank you. That actually, so I'm gonna try and wrap up because I'm gonna try not to have your trust in us and respecting your time misplaced. And something that you said that actually in all my notes in preparation I didn't really, you know, write down, but it kind of clicked. So, you know, I trusted that in the moment it would come together. But what Ivan said about when he goes to these places, how does he connect, how does he build trust with these people who he may have nothing to do with? And you know, you said it's about the stories, right? And it's about the stories that you tell, it's about the stories that you hear, and it's about the story that we're making all together right now. And that's really, I think, the biggest thing that we all have in common, at the end of the day, is we all have our story, we have our personal story, we have the story that we play a part in, whether it's like the story of the country, the story of this time that we're living in. And I think that stories are really the thing at the end of the day that allow us to bridge that gap in trust between, you know, our role in the story and how other people fit in, and that we're all part of a shared story, whatever that story is. So I'm gonna end on that, end the story for now on that note. I don't know if we have time to take like maybe a couple questions if you guys have for any of the panelists. We have like one or two.
Yeah, one or two.
If anyone has any questions, if not, we can, and then you can linger and ask people questions off stage. But any questions? I got one question up there.
So, I've known Ivan for a while, and your art style started, I don't know if you can see that panel over there, the little virus face.
Yeah, a little double back.
And it used to be these little demonic characters. And how do you evolve from that to where you're at now, where you're painting like these beautiful, large-scale animal murals? It's like a completely different style, but I'm just curious how the path from A to B.
So, so I was, like I was saying, I viewed a lot of troubling things, and again, it comes down to trust. This is, I'll just give you a quick blip, and this is as dark as it gets. You know what I'm saying, without going too crazy. So at the age of 8, I had a gun put to my head, because of some pretty bad people, and I think that right there probably, at that moment, I should have probably the defining point of like trust, right? Like there, I probably should have not trusted anybody ever again. You know what I'm saying? But things like that, and things over the years of seeing it, you know what I'm saying, like being around the area that I was and viewing certain things and all that, and not to mention listening to finding Eminem CDs at the age of 8 years old, Marshall Mathers LP, 8 years old, like you're like, yeah, man, yeah. That's pretty brutal stuff, right? So I kind of always had like this dark narrative, and like always my work was always dark and all that. And then I remember talking to an artist, Ruben Ubiera, and he would always go to me. He's like, yeah, man, you have to think about, like how can you channel all your energy and make it in a way that's palatable for everyone, and something that everyone can can not be repulsed by. And I'm like, things like that kind of stuck with me, and I'm like, okay. And then, that's when I saw the assassination of Gianni Versace. It came out on FX about a few years back. I don't know if you guys remember. Great show.
I mean the show, not the actual.
No, not the actual. No. That's wild. That's wild. You know what I'm saying? So like I was seeing the colors, right, and I'm seeing like all the blues and the pinks and how they really grabbed onto that whole Miami aesthetic. But it was such a dark and stuck to show, and I'm like, and I changed my color palette right there, and then I'm like, you know what, let me embrace where I'm from, and start bringing these pastel pinks and these aquas and these yellows and all that, and I brought all that together, and I still kept the imagery, right, I still kept some of the dark imagery, and but I was able to be symbolic. I can add flowers, I can hide like things between certain animals, but certain animals mean certain things to certain cultures. You know what I'm saying? Or it might mean something to me at the moment, right? So like for me, like whenever I paint my hyenas with the glowing eyes, and the flowers that you might not see it, but like to me that's a poisonous flower, and the hyena represents something that lingers within all of us. You know what I'm saying? That shadow that just sits there looking at you and just trying to lead you into some sort of temptation to do God knows what, right? But you fight against that. So sometimes there's that way to put that out there. And so little by little I started doing that, and started realizing people were connecting with this much more. And I can also take this to everywhere. And I was like, man, this is something that's like really, 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 really special. And like, I can just create this whole world of vines and flowers and just wrapping and all that. All I have to do is just change the color schemes, change the animal, change the symbolism, and give it a nice story, and there you go.
You guys have one more? Yeah.
I want to hear from the panelists how trusting in yourself has shaped your career. If you've done something a little divergent than maybe what you initially set out to do, or
Yeah, definitely trusting in yourself has been a really big factor for me. And I know one of the questions was, what moment in your life did you really start trusting yourself? And for me, when I started trusting myself was when I was about to graduate from FIU. I had been working full-time and going to school full-time, so I really didn't have like a college experience. And very randomly, I won't get into like how everything worked out, but it all worked out so perfectly for me to go to do this study exchange in Denmark for 6 months. And I spent all my life savings. I had saved $6,000. I wasn't that much back then, but as a college kid, that's a pretty good amount. And I just figured out my path there, and I just figured it all out, and was able to pay for 6 months by myself, didn't get myself into any debt. The fact that I was able to do that, I came back so rejuvenated and just like, wow, if I can do that, I can do more. And that was a very pivotal moment for me. And ever since then, I just realized how important trust in yourself is. And that really, that was a big just moment in my life. So trusting in yourself is everything. But yeah.
It's an interesting question. Because I specialize in alternative music. Folk music is not mainstream. I have to find my own audience. And I'm still in therapy. I'm trying to trust myself. That's all I'll say.
I guess just real quick there. So for me, for my example, you know what I'm saying, of basically trusting myself. Well, for one, I didn't know I was gonna be an artist. You know, I don't know. You know, I know a lot of people here that probably come from like first generation immigrant families, and the first thing that nobody tells you is like, oh, you can be an artist, you can be a dancer, you can be something creative in your life. Well, be this. You know, the reality is everybody wants you to be like a lawyer, a doctor, and all that. That wasn't happening for me. I was terrible in school. I got a 2.7 GPA on weighted and 3.5 weighted, which is complete bullshit. Realize that now, you know. But for me, you know, like I was always like in art class. I was literally skip everything to go to art class, you know. And so people were like, oh, why don't you like become an artist? You know, I was like, maybe, you know. And then I remember I finished high school and all that. I said, oh, I was gonna be. I remember I told my dad I was being an artist. Man, this guy there, he was like, why you be an artist? This man, he's making money. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, you know, and nobody believed me. Everybody was completely against me being an artist. Everybody talked mad shit to me. Everybody's like, oh, you know, you're gonna starve, and people would laugh at me at the beginning, and just all types of failures. And it was to the point where I was pushing, you know, and then eventually I became homeless at one point. You know, living in Opalaka there, like in this really sketchy office by the flea market. You know, it's not even homes. It's like, it was like weird. Like, you know, we was in this little office space, and then like there were like these two dudes that lived over there in this office space, and then the backyards, like there was this old man, this other young guy. They would pass by the window. They would have the vents open, and they'd be like, that looks great, man. Oh, man, thanks, you know. But and at that moment, I could easily quit, right? You have friends there that they're doing these regular jobs and they're fine, they're living very comfortable lives, and you know, it was many times where I could have quit, but every single time, I always said I'm just gonna push a little further. And I keep trusting myself to push a little further, just a little bit more. And every single time I said that, every single time I did that, some opportunity came that kept me going. And then little by little, I just kept believing and kept working and all that, and just didn't stop. And thankfully, I've been able to do what I do. You know, so at the end of the day, you just gotta believe in yourself. And when all adversity is in your face, wake up, drink some coffee, and see adelante. You know, keep moving forward. That's it.
I don't think we're going to end on a higher note than that. So, well, and here you guys can stick around for a little bit. There's still the bagels and coffee, and talk to our panelists or me, and enjoy the space. You can peek into the studios. Thank you.
Thank you.